where I usually talk about what's morally right. But today, I simply have a question. And that question is, how do you see God? Now, I know this is random to most people, but it is a question and it has to do with moral values. Because how you see God is how you live your life, or how you interact with people in life, and so on and so forth. So the question is, how do you see God? Now, to make it very complex, there's lots of different walks of life. So there's lots of different people's opinions on how they believe in God and how they see God and choose to believe in God. But belief is a whole different concept of how you see God. And I thought about this for quite a while now. This is why I'm kind of doing this before the times I usually post. But the thing about it is, if you see God as a God, and the thing about it is, not too many people understand gods. They know the word. They can look up a definition of the meaning of the word. They could even go beyond that and try to figure out what gods do and how do they operate, how they were created, and so forth. I mean, you can go through any type of culture and there's some kind of God. But the ultimate God, God Almighty, you know, God Most High, you know, so forth. I'm just saying, how do you see Him? And the reason why this has been compelling my mind is because I've been focusing on how I believe on God a lot. And I've been wondering, how do people see God in other situations? Because there's people I come across, that as soon as you mention God, they're pissed off. They're mad. They're screaming, I don't believe in God. Da, 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 da. Then you got those that say they believe in God, but then they got a different concept of how they believe. But are unable to listen to how you believe in God or what you think about God. Then you got those that sit back and they will say, well, if God was real, He would do this and that and so forth. But not truly understanding the concept of what God does and what He promised it done, because they haven't read the Bible. But yet they'll say, if God does this. And the one they like to throw out a lot because they don't understand free will. And they'll be like, if God was here, He wouldn't have let this happen. If God did that, He wouldn't have did this. But that's someone who didn't have faith or belief to begin with. So, once again, the question is, how do you see God? Now, I tend to see God not just as, a father that's, it says Father art in heaven, but mostly as a king and ruler of everything. And I see Him as the ultimate king of everything. Okay? And I know we don't live under a monarchy, but it doesn't mean we don't understand it. And you gotta look at it. God created the universe. Every star, every planet, every galaxy, and the whole universe itself. Every tiny bit of material, minerals, organisms, cells, atoms. It goes on and on and on. Life forms, both mammal, non-mammal, insects, quadrupeds. Everything is a continued. Everything is all God. So God has to be in everything because He created everything. And even with that, it comes a sense of loyalty that you must have towards God, a sense of pride and honor, but you can't be too prideful, which is another question that comes up. This is a very interesting thing. And like I said, I've been thinking about this for quite some time. And it's been about a week now. I've been thinking about doing this and talking about it, and kind of holding off because I wanted to do other things. But I was like, no, I got to talk about this. And so, me seeing God as a king, I understand that I have to do things a certain way of God's wishing. Now, me backtracking on things in life that might go against the will of God is ultimate beating yourself up type of thing. Beating myself up because, hey, well, God wouldn't want me to do this and that. In a way, believing in God, in a sense, could make people hold back on life in certain ways. Certain things that other people would consider to be fun or enjoyable or whatever, because they're more into the circular world and underneath God that is already trying to destroy the world. in so many ways. Okay, but you have to think about it like this. It's like there's a God controlling everything, and if you see Him as your Father, then that's the person you go to hear your problems, the person that you will always try to please, or will always try to, you know, I don't know how to explain it, get emotional attachments to, get inspiration from, draw knowledge from, all that. If you see God as your Father, if you see God as a King, you automatically have that loyalty. You automatically know there's a consequence for everything that you do that's negative, and you know that you have to serve God's kingdom uh, with the utmost respect and loyalty and honor. These are things that come with the role of working underneath a king, you know. And so it's even more complex when you look at how certain people are. And when I say certain people, I mean those who have given up. You know, sometimes at the most lowest lows is a time to reach out to God. You know, so many people will walk around and they'll be like, I'm miserable, I'm depressed, or I got this and ADHD and all this crap they be yelling out. How much often do they go, instead of going to a therapist or going to the pharmacy? Guess what mental illnesses do? Or when anytime you feel like you're self-destructive, you would go to a doctor and they'll give you medication to strive to get rid of that pain, that misery, that guilt, that suffering, whatever it is. You know, the depression, you know, when all they could probably do is sit there and actually call on this God and pray and say, hey, God, you know, and don't just say a prayer and act like He's a genie and say, hey, I want this, I want that. But act like you're actually talking to somebody. People say it's crazy to talk to yourself, but you can talk to God within you, which will be a beacon to God Almighty, if that makes any sense. You know, the Jesus that's part of you, the whatever you want to think. Okay, but I'm just saying, prayer helps level out your thoughts, ease your mind. This is where I believe meditating and concentrating on God's word in a place where there's no distractions is the best way to humble yourself in your mind to be able to believe and get that answer you want from God, to get those prayers out, to get those problems out. What you put out in the universe will come back. You know, there's a conversation I had today with somebody who showed me a video of a guy we know who has the most worst luck, and it really is not worst luck, it's karma. I mean, literally, it's like watching a movie every freaking week. Something happens to this guy's car. And it's funny as hell. We were just talking about it earlier today. But it's the truth, you know. It's like certain things in the element will come back to you. If you don't believe in that, then there's a problem. The only reason why it's not really mentioned too much in the Christian faith is because it's mostly Asian, it's mostly Chinese belief system by the creator Lao Tzu, or philosopher Lao Tzu. But when it happens, you got to be like, well, there's no other choice. You can say it's a judgment by God, but God works through karma, believe it or not. At least it makes sense. It does make sense. So maybe, you know, God doesn't call it that, or Christians don't call it that, but it has to be that way. It makes more sense. The question is, so how do you look at God? So I've already covered how I believe a king or someone that believes God is their father will act and respond. And I think that scenario right there, where you believe God, see God as your father, holds strong to those that don't have one and need one. They have to believe in a father. So the only father they have is God Himself. And I don't see anything wrong with that. I mean, sure, who wouldn't want a God to be their father? You know, God Himself, who wouldn't want that? You know, and so that's a good way to look at God. And so as a king, it's a good way to look at God, creator, ruler of everything. It makes sense, you know. And so even if you look at him as a father, then you're looking at the ultimate parent, and you're supposed to be the good child of God. If you're looking at him as a king, then you're looking at him from the eyes of a warrior, or peasant that wants to serve their ruler, and become a great warrior of God. It's the ultimate purpose of looking at him as a king. Now let's look at a different light. Those that look at God as a tyrant. Those that blame God for everything in their life. Like, why wasn't he there? Why was this happening? All this stuff. Free will has to be explained to society in a different way, because certain things, people are more focused on words that don't make sense nowadays, and made up words and things that confuse the populace, and everyone falls into it because they want to be part of this, they want to be accepted. But what are they being accepted by? Is the thing you're being accepted by the right thing, or is it the wrong thing? And even if it is the right thing, what makes it right? So it's just a thing I'm throwing out there. There's a concept to make you think, But what I'm saying is, they look at God as a tyrant, like he's the ultimate punisher. He's cruel, he's mean, he's wicked, he's complicated. But what humanity has isn't better than anything else that came before. Even though we got technology and all this crap, it's actually dooming us. It's destroying humanity. It's destroying mentalities and everything else. And physical natures. It's destroying bodies and all that. And I'm saying that because there's so much time people spend on the internet, it just trips me out. There's days where I'll walk around the city or whatever, and then I won't have my cell phone, messing with it, but I notice everybody else is. And then there's days where I'm using my cell phone way too much. Here's the funny thing, I don't ever want to call nobody. It is called a cell phone. It's really just a computer I'm walking around with. So it's just like, I believe the people that look at God as a tyrant have more faith in man than they do in God. And that's just my belief system, or at least the way I've been thinking lately. Because they'll sit there and say, oh, there's no God. And then they wonder all this negative stuff happens to them. And then when something really, really terrifying, something like, oh my God, so there's a God, or you wouldn't be calling to him. And that's the same thing with atheists. They wouldn't be like, oh my God, And then the atheist is a complex issue. Because there's a lot of them I talk to that will say that they learned God, or they went to school or learned God, and they had to prove that they wasn't no God. So they prove all these facts into believing in God, or trying to prove that God isn't real. And then somehow their facts are jaded or flawed, because there's always something else that explains that there's something more powerful than just them believing in something. The spirit world isn't a joke, people. It's actually goes side to side with the earth. It's like we always talk about the dark side of the moon. Well, the dark side of earth is a spirit world. It's not even dark, but the ones that people choose to believe in is, and that's the ones that haunt the world and cause chaos amongst mankind. This is why we need a God to show the light out the darkness. And it just makes more sense. You wouldn't hear crap like this going on outside my place. If people didn't believe in it causing chaos and starting wickedness. But honestly, God's light is there to show us the way to him, to salvation, to freedom, and everything. But people look at God as the enemy, or a strict ruler, a dictator. And a lot of people look at God in so many ways it's messed up. But what I'm saying about free will has to do a lot with that. When God was young, I guess, the earth was young, humans were newly made, along with everything else on the planet. God sat back and worked with us and tried to say, hey, do this, and then they do that, and then it would just irk them. Just imagine being around the friends that's full of drama and complicated, and every day you try to work with them. After a while, you start to realize this is toxic, their whole relationship's messed up, this whole conversation they be having is crazy, and I just gotta get away from them. And so you gotta look at it like that, but think about it in God's point of view. He's sitting there, he's working with something he loved, he created, he's happy about it. But here's the thing, they kept trying to get their own things and what they wanted, and it caused so much chaos and wars and so forth and so on. And they even wanted a new king. They wanted a king. They didn't want God to be their king. So they chose a guy called Saul, who later on became, he Saul, King Saul. And then later on David became king. and then not Samson, but Solomon, and so on and so forth. But the thing is, all before kings in the Bible, God was the king. God was the ruler, the creator. And then when kings in the Bible popped up, and the king saw, because they wanted a human king, they didn't want a God they couldn't, or a person they couldn't be in front of. And they wanted to be more like other tribes and other people. And so they chose that king, and that king was the most confused king, and had to always go to God's prophet to figure out what God wanted. So he's more like an advisory, like he had to ask for God's permission to do things, and God would tell him, and then he would go against it. And so this is where David made a better king, and then he did something wrong, and then Solomon came about. So it's something where you have to look at it like this: the people wanted more, but weren't willing to accept what they had. Pretty much, they weren't comfortable with what they had. Okay, or they didn't appreciate what they had. So it's like there's a good lesson of that in normal human day life in the 21st century is, appreciate what you got, okay? Because you might not have it for long, or somebody might try to take it from you. So just appreciate what you have, And so if you have God, and these people have God, they should have appreciated it, but they didn't, and history's already set in stone when it comes to that issue. Not unless you're time travel. And then the question is, what I'm saying is, once again, because I'm trying not to go off topic like always, but with free will, God said, okay, I'm giving you guys the chance to do whatever you want. All you have to do is believe in me. You have to believe in me, pray to me, and, I will grant everything you want and make it happen. And so that's what free will is. It's kind of like when you're playing The Sims. If you ever played The Sims, and there's you're building a little house or whatever, and people or whatever, then you can control them all day long and give them thoughts, make them do stuff, make them do what's right, constantly make them do that. Or you can put it in free will mode, where they walk around and do everything. You just step in and intervene when they do something messed up. Other than that, you let them live their life. So those of you that plays The Sims and knows what I'm talking about, I think the one that I played back when now was that Sims Busted Out, and that's what they did. Had a free will mode and had a regular mode. And so, it makes sense. It definitely makes sense. And so this is why we need the prayer. This is why we need communion and congregations and all that, because we got to find a way to get God to be pleased with us, to enjoy us, and to get rid of all sin in our life and negativity, wickedness, and evil. And if you're nurturing any of that, then you're not of God. You should be able to walk away and just say, hey, I'm cool. I don't want to be a part of this. And so the thing about it is, with the question, still a question, how do you see God? Does any of those people see free will as a way of understanding God, or what? You don't know. And I think it's because God's not a physical entity that no one's seeing, and so they automatically believe he's not real. It's like talking about Santa Claus or Tooth Fairy. That's how they look at it. Oh, it's like Santa Claus. They know Santa ain't real, but they're going to tell their kids about it anyway. They know the Tooth Fairy ain't real, but they're going to put dollars in the kids' pockets or something. I don't even remember how it works. Or their pockets or some crap. I don't know. And so, Tooth Fairies. But anyway, so the thing I'm saying is, honestly, that's how they look at God, like he doesn't exist, and so all these are just fairy tales or some crap, and it's not true. We all have legends of our cultures, and all of them have some bit of the truth. It's just we're too ignorant to realize that stuff in there make a lot of sense. So people always talk about Egypt, and they talk about how Egypt had technology, Egypt had aliens, and Egypt had this and that. What makes Egypt better than any other culture when a lot of cultures are similar to Egypt? When people talked about the same thing with Atlantis, that Atlantis had all this technology and it was way more advanced than any of us knew about, and then it got sunk undersea, earthquake or something happened and took the whole city of Atlantis under the ocean, And so Even with that being said, there's knowledge that we probably can't obtain. And I'm talking not just about Egypt and Atlantis. I'm just saying there's knowledge that we can't obtain because we're not on the same mental wavelength as the Egyptians or the Atlanteans were. And we all know that if you know the Bible, everyone's been through Egypt. Literally every patriarch or whatever you want to call it, he has been through Egypt. Okay, I'm talking about Jesus himself went to Egypt. Moses came from Egypt. He was a prince of Egypt. You know, he had Abraham, Isaac, even Jacob. Well, I can't remember where Jacob went, but Isaac and they all went to Egypt. And later on in the book, you know, more people go to Egypt and come back and so forth. So it means to me, when people talk about Egypt, the most knowledgeable thing in Egypt is in the Bible. You know, and especially the story of Joseph, which I forgot about. Joseph is the main person that brought the Israelites and all that to Egypt was Joseph, and then Moses was later, 300 years later, if I remember right. But the thing about it is, with Moses, here's the difference. Moses is a person who was on the mountain, and God was there, and they said no one should see the face of God and shall live. And Moses was lit up by this, you know, just the essence of being around God. Light all over his body, shining, you know, he got the whole, you know, he had the glow, you know, he had that super powered glow. And, but he was there in the presence of God. And at the same time, another person who was close enough to God. Now, this one's a little, depends on how you believe it, but people like to throw the aliens in there and all that, and they try to say, oh, well, that's not what happened. But anyway, Abraham, you know, Sarah couldn't give birth. She's, I don't know, kicking 80 years old or something. And then the aliens come, or this is how they say the aliens come. I'm trying to put it in that term because this is how people tend to want to believe the story. Is that the aliens came and they talked to her, got her pregnant, and, you know, left or whatever. But, and then they say one of them was God. But in the Bible it says that 3 angels came to visit Sarah. One went in the tent and helped her out. And then when they were done, she was able to give birth. At the same time, 2 angels went to the city of Gomorrah, Sodom and Gomorrah, the 2 cities of sin. And one angel stayed with them that they say is God. And because later on, Abraham is praying to him saying, because he's saying, hey, I'm going to destroy these cities because they, you know, sinful and they do ungodly things and so forth and other perversions and whatnot. And so Abraham was like, oh, can't you just spare like one, or how you spare? First he starts off with 50, and God's like, you know, no, there's not 50 worthy. And he goes all the way down to 1, which is supposed to be his nephew and his family, which really doesn't count if you say 1, and he has 2 daughters and a wife, so it would be 4, but he never said 4, he said 1. And you see, you have to know the Bible and all I'm talking about. But anyway, so God says, okay, I'll spare the 1. The angels get to Sodom and Gomorrah, met his nephew Lot, and then when that situation happened, you know what I'm saying, there's a whole scenario, which I've explained before, about how the angels blinded the people and they wanted to have sex with them. It's some crazy nonsense. But anyway, so minus that part, the part where God talks to Abraham is questionable in the sense that people believe that the 3rd angel was God. And if God was an angel, or looks like an angel, then that would mean that God can be in a form that humans can understand. You know, even though we can say angels are very powerful and we can't understand what they look like, and then they got all these different types of angels they show you now what they look like. You know, there had to be something back then to where we could say, hey, we could socialize this thing because it looks like us. So I tend to believe more in the sense that an angel looks like a human with wings or whatnot, or even in a pleasant or essence of God like Moses was, where he got lit up by being in the presence of God. And maybe it's a human that's got Shahayim glory, which if you guys go do your biblical research, or actually I learned that through Hebrew studies. So if you got Shahayim glory, it's like you lit up, and they say Adam and Eve had Shahayim glory and they had this power, they could just go like this and flowers would grow because they were tending the garden, and so forth. But my point is this, okay? So Moses was able to see God without no problem, but still had to turn his back away from God. I don't know, his head was going to explode or something. And Abraham had to pray to God pretty much to try to get him to save his nephew. So you can say God was in everywhere when he was talking to Abraham, or he was actually that angel. And there's also a form of science in that story too, with so many generations. After a while, with no replicating DNA, and so you can stop birth or something. I don't know how it really works, but the point, once again, when it comes down to it, the people that puts these debates out about aliens being in the Bible with these patriarchs or matriarchs, whatever, okay, they're not. They're trying to take away the knowledge of God. They're trying to take away you believing in God. They want you to believe that God's an alien or some sci-fi creature. They want you to believe that all these things are scientifically explained, even though the Bible has its own science that explains things perfectly. Even explains racism perfectly, or the racists, I should say. What we call them, racists, whatever. And I'm not talking about being racist, I'm talking about every race. If I can make sense there, okay? But honestly, that's the truth. So I just want to try to get a sense of understanding, not so much on the part of God interacting with humans, but understanding on God himself, as understanding of why people see God in so many different ways, and why it's so hard for people to believe even when they see the unbelievable. I've been seeing the unbelievable so many times when it comes to certain things, supernatural things I can't explain, things I've seen that other people haven't. And when I'm not talking about being drunk or high or on some mental illness crap. I'm talking about straight up regular day on marble. I ain't normal. I sound like I said marble, but normal. I ain't had no alcohol, no anything, and just walking about like, okay, I'm gonna go do this, and then bang, I see something happen that can only be explained by an act of God. And I'm pretty positive a lot of you have too. The thing is, as soon as you start explaining it, you're crazy, or you're nuts, or you're a psychopath. Which brings me to a whole nother concept: how many people have God tried to make prophets of? I mean, we know in the Bible there's tons of them. They even got the minor prophets. There's everything in the minor prophets after Daniel is just minor prophets. Even Daniel himself might be considered a minor prophet, but there's a lot of stuff that happened with him and King Nebuchadnezzar and Belshazzar and the Persian king. He was a big part in history if you think about it. Babylonians, Persians, Hebrew, so forth. But the thing of what I'm trying to say is this, okay? So people have that issue. They have that issue where they don't know. And so the thing with they not knowing, it makes me wonder how many prophets has there been in our time period, within the 20th century, within the 21st century, even the 19th century. How many prophets has there been that's probably been used as martyrs, like, saints, like the saints? If you go get the book of saints, there's like 4 of them. I had them, I still might have them in my storage or whatever, but it tells you all about each saint and how they died, how they became a saint, but they all died in the name of God in all kinds of different ways. And makes you wonder how many prophets have God put out on the earth that's either been locked up in jail or the nut house, because like I said, once you start talking about God and stuff, they say, oh, you're crazy, you're insane. And so they might have put him in a nut house, or straight up just killed him, or did some brutality type of stuff to him. Who knows? I mean, they even tell you about in the Bible how they got rid of John the Baptist, beheading him. The daughter of the king was obsessed with some daughter that was dancing sexy or something, and this was King Herod. His wife or whatever said, oh, we want to serve John the Baptist's head to you or something like that. It's been a minute, but I mean, who knows what they did to his head after that? The Bible doesn't explain if they ate his head or what. but it's still gruesome. And so you have to wonder how many people has it truly been that were actual prophets, actually understood the spirit world, understood God Almighty, Jesus, everything that we need to know to survive. How many, and then how many have got accepted, but then turned evil once they have obtained power, obtained the knowledge and the wisdom of man's world over God's world. So it's this big concept that's just so confusing and twisted. And I don't know where I came up with this week, where I just started thinking like, how do people see God? And I had a conversation with somebody, and they go to church, and this is something I hear a lot too. They go to church, and they say, "Oh, well, yeah, I believe in God," but they don't really understand the stuff in the Bible. Like how right now, like I just explained multiple different parts of the Bible, different books, within the seconds and minutes, and that's how you would know more about the Bible. But then some people that go to church, they'll sit there and they'll be like, "Oh yeah, I believe in God," and yet they don't have any knowledge on biblical word. I tend to believe when it comes to prayer, and this is just my opinion, when it comes to prayer, you have to know some biblical prayer. This is what Psalms is about, I think, because in Psalms they're mostly prayers to God. Proverbs and Psalms are actually things, but there's more prayers in Psalms. But my thing is, I think God likes it to know that you understand Him and know Him. He likes to know that you're aware of His Word. So if you pray the Word back to Him in so many ways, and I'm not just saying, Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, but I'm saying like when you say stuff like, like what Abraham said, when he goes, or was that Jacob? Anyway, God, prayer, curse those that curse me, bless those that bless me. That's in the Bible, and I think that's in Genesis. I want to say Abraham, but it got to be Jacob. It's been a minute. But if you say stuff like what you know in the Bible that actually is prayers to God, that is similar to the reason why you're praying to God, I believe He appreciates you more, because it shows you are a child of God to Him. And I'm not just saying these things just to make a joke or any kind of humiliation thing, or even trying to force people to believe in this concept of what I'm talking about, because it's been there for thousands of years. All this stuff has been there for thousands of years. I'm not the newest guy to tell you something you ain't never heard of. I'm just a guy that's trying to explain something that's a thought on my mind that reaches on something that has to do with everything: Earth, humanity, the universe, time, space, the mortal coil, everything. Humanity. And so what I'm saying is, you have to watch out for certain people's belief in God, because it leads you to the wrong path. Some people be like, "Oh yeah, look at the videos of God, the comedian that goes, 'God loves me the most,' and this shit struck down." Now, if that isn't a sign God put you on your butt, I don't know what is. And then there's so many other ones they show. And yes, you should be aware that that's a big sin. Anyone thinking they're God, anybody thinking they're, more powerful than God, even those that got power, that have the wills over someone's life, they need to be looked at in a certain way. When I mean that, I mean like doctors, lawyers, judges. They have to be looked at in a different way, because somewhere in there they went power mad. This is why we have perjury, because hey, they went against the law and practices they want because they thought they were above the law. And if they think they're above the law, then they think they're above God, which means they're already damned for going straight to the city of Diz and hell. That's the whole thing. And it's, if you don't believe in hell, then there's always a dark, narrow tunnel, type of thing. But once again, I did go off topic, because I'm trying to, seriously, I've been racking my brain around this for a week or two now, and I've been sitting there keep thinking to myself, how do people see God? Because I interact with someone and I'm hearing things and I'm thinking, okay, There's people, oh, I don't believe in God. And there's one girl gave me some dumb excuse, and it didn't make any damn sense. But yet everything in her life is misery. I analyzed it. She says she don't believe in God. There's no God. If the God, I don't like him and all this crap. But yet she has misery, has suffering from people she lost. She keeps getting into accidents. There's all kinds of people that despise her or have a problem with her, people that want to fight her, and all this stuff. But if she believed in God, none of that would be happening. If she believed in a little bit of something positive, and that's the main thing, this woman's negative. If she wasn't so negative, greater things happen in your life. So I believe if you put out positivity, you get positivity back. If you're a good person, positivity should be a part of your nature. And so you should automatically get that back. Negativity will only bring more negativity, more corruption, and then eventually a whole bunch of chaos that ain't nobody ready for. So depends on who you are. If you want to nurture the bad and stuff and it works for you, then that's your thing. But we already know nothing lasts forever. Everything must pass. And so might as well go out in a good light instead of the negative. Rather be a positivity to the world than a negative. I don't know how some people tend to believe, but I'll say when it comes to atheists, it's a thing of trying to know all this stuff to deny God. And I kind of believe in a way that the atheists have their own religion, and that would be, believe it or not, Jehovah's Witnesses, because they know a lot of stuff that's supposed to be facts that they throw in the Bible. One fact I didn't like is when they try to throw evolution in the Bible, which evolution was created by Charles Darwin, but before that there was a whole other guy named Lyell. And Charles Darwin went to Galapagos with the Bible in a book of this dude Lyell, and was able to know about, he was talking about embryos, all start off the same, which isn't the truth. And the Bible, of course, it has its own knowledge, but to tie the two together is quite insane. That's like reading a book about Freddy Krueger and tying it together with freaking Dr. Seuss. It makes no sense. Okay? So I believe it's a thing where people have to find the knowledge by going and looking for it in the book for themselves. Okay? Even if you can't read the Bible, will come to you. It's like when you got that one of those story books or whatever. I can't remember what movie it is. I'm trying to think of it right now. But anyway, the guy couldn't read, and all of a sudden the stuff cleared up, and he could read it all of a sudden. You know what I'm saying? That's kind of how it is. And it will show itself to you. It will put the words in there for you. If you are a child of God or whatnot. There's only so many types, I believe, that can read the Bible. And that's those who are true children of God. Those who are prone to wanting to know about God, and those who are in line with the other side. And you should know where I'm going with that. So I'm just saying, you truly understand it. Otherwise, you have people who just hate it to hate it. I had people yell at me about, I don't believe in God. I had people cuss me out about it. And they try to throw all these different facts, especially people who end up trying to find other religions as replacements for God. And throwing all this Hindu stuff at me, which doesn't make sense, because they believe Hindu is the original race on Earth, the first race, which is ridiculous, because we all have something that proves that we come back from way when, as cultures. You know what I'm saying? I mean, way back. Once again, Egypt, Greece, Rome, everything in the Aztecs, and Mayans, and all that. So how can you just say one race is the thing? I think the belief comes from the Tower of Babel, where all the races were together. We all spoke one language. We tried to build this giant tower to God. And God looked down, saw how arrogant we were and selfish, and decided to change our language and spread us all over the world. Half the stories we got in every culture all tie together with other things that happen in other cultures. Why is that? Because they were all in the same spot at one time and all witnessed it. Maybe one parent, someone's grandfather, someone's niece or nephew, and they got thrown across this other place, and they were able to keep the story going. And other coaches were able to still remember because, hey, they was related to that person and so forth. You know, I mean, there's so many different ways you can analyze a situation and realize that we're all connected. The only thing keeping us separate is man's world, of man's mentality. The whole fact of race being built by not just the American concept of trying to have a whole culture for themselves, practicing separation, but preaching that they're integrating, that they're practicing that they're supposed to be together, and that started the whole concept in a hateful way here in America. And the British, by them going around trying to colonize, they was able to sit back and give you books and things like all kinds of plants, all kinds of everything, fish and everything. They categorized everything. They even categorized humans. And so I even have a thing of that, where they categorize and tell you what they believe is white, what they believe is black, Asian, blah, blah, blah. And it's all there. And so it's the whole thing about it is America took it to a whole nother level and just made it a mockery of humanity by you or anyone talking about this person's white, that person's black, that person's Mexican, and all this shit. You're like pretty much giving them more reasons to keep doing it, but you're making a mockery of your whole humanity. Looking at the smallest part of humanity, than the full essence of the biology of humanity. It's a small part of biology of humanity is our skin color. The biggest part is the brain, the heart, and every muscle that gives you superpowers. And I was being real right there. That's kind of through the superpower because it was kind of funny. But honestly, I want a world with God. I want a world where there's happiness every day. I don't care if it looks like, Brady Bunch or freaking Leave It to Beaver. But something where people are walking around feeling a lot more positive. People don't get down and out and believe there's no hope. People that take their lives because they lost misery, they became so toxic they can't find a friend, or they can't find someone to lean on to, a place where people can actually find lovers instead of this alternative crap with the AI robots or going to dating sites and all that nonsense. And on top of that, a place where everyone feels accepted, warm, and comfortable with the people in their lives. No one's abandoned unless they choose to be on their own for a while. No one's suffering. No one's being possessed. Even if though y'all don't believe it, but there's most definitely people running around that is possessed, and a lot of you know that. And it all started with someone abandoning them, taking away their trust, making them break down for who they are, and to turn into something that they're not. And even if it's about drugs, it's like somewhere in there they felt that, hey, this might be the party, this might be the thing to go to keep me happy. When they lost the real things that might make them happy in life and comfortable. I think the worst part about it is there's people pretending, wolves in sheep's clothing, pretending to be of God, and yet they pull people away by doing the most sickest things, molesting or beating or accusing people of things and all this other crap that they would do to torture some people. There's stories I've heard, especially with preachers and their kids, and it's just outrageous that they would even put the title of God before the things they've done, while even trying to get repentance, and which is a whole other concept that has to be done. You have to repent for your sins, your actions, your negativity when you pray. In the olden days, there was more of a serious thing. It'd be equivalent exchange. You cut off a finger or a limb or something like that for God in order to get something back. And I don't know if that's something that's more of this Christian, not really a Christian thing, more of a Catholic thing, I think, or even some kind of pagan type of thing, where they did it to other gods. Sacrificing something would mean you want the blood to be able to make something whole into human form or flesh. So you need to give your God flesh, so they would sacrifice. And so in the Bible, they sacrificed a lot of lambs, and a lot of it for Passover, the whole thing of Israel, and or not, it wasn't Israel then, but it was Egypt and all this stuff with making sure that they can put the mark of the blood on the door, so the angel of death wouldn't take them out, and only take out the firstborn children of Egypt. And so Passover's always been done. The thing was, when Jesus got crucified, was the same day of Passover. Jesus was a sacrificial lamb. Jesus was all that lamb's blood before that got brought in human form. And this is what sacrifice was all about in them times. But when you say sacrifice to people, and they only understand that part, they don't understand about sacrifice in a way where you can lose something. Not about just killing some animal and worshiping a god, but about giving up something that's taking things away from your life. It doesn't have to be a being or a person. It could be cigarettes, it could be coffee, it could be sex, it could be drugs, it could be anything. And with that being said, there's a lot of people who have to sacrifice these things so they can live again. You know, there's lots of things you need to sacrifice to be able to become strong again, to be an inspiration, not just to yourself, but to everybody around you that cares for you. So you got to give up things, you know. Even if you're giving up those people in your life because you know they're not right, or the way they're living isn't the way you choose to live, you have to sacrifice them to get the lifestyle that you wanted. And I'm not talking about, once again, killing them. I'm talking about just getting rid of the negativity that thing in your life until you can find a time to where you can fit them in or not fit them at all. We have to give up these things that are killing us and putting us in early graves and aging us quickly before our time. I mean, look at my gray hairs. I mean, honestly, it makes no sense how old I got all of a sudden. And I still think I'm 17. No, but honestly, we need to give credit to where credit's due. To God the Most High. To Jesus himself for the things he's done when he was on earth. As well as everything in creation that was created by God. We gotta give credit to those things. I'm tired of hearing about humanity's achievements when humanity tests people and do experiments on people and cage people, which no other being on earth does. Humanity is the most complex, wicked creature on this whole planet, and no one is perfect, and there is no superior race when the human race itself is flawed. It can only lead to destruction and eternal damnation as long as you continue to follow things in a path when you already learned it from someone else who didn't have that same, belief. We're talking about someone who will go out there and start a protest and all that because they don't want to believe. These people lost faith a long time ago. They lost everything in their life that meant something, so they're putting their focus on something that give them purpose. But the purpose that they want, everyone else isn't going to accept. And that's the flaw in our humanity, and this is where God comes in. Because with God, we can accept something, and other people can accept that and find peace with that. But if you accept everything that you believe in the world, then you're accepting things that you may not be aware of, things that you've forgotten. This is why trying to do research on things before you get into it makes more sense and makes you more knowledgeable than the next person. Even if people don't believe you after you learned it, keep it and learn it, and then teach it to your children or someone that needs to be taught the truth. Because the truth, like they say in the X-Files, is out there. And you just gotta grab it. Okay? You gotta grab it and take it and keep it in your heart. But I believe I can't solve this question that I've made this whole episode about is, how do you see God? So, with that being said, I'm reaching out to any of you guys that are watching this, and I want to know your personal opinion. Seriously, how do you see God? How do you see the universe? How do you see mankind? I know those are 3 different questions, but they all are in the same world, same vector, same category. And I want to know. And I have to say that, like I say always, this has been Moral High Ground. Peace be with you. Blessings upon you. And if you made it so far, just go on and subscribe and like it if you dig. And have a great day. Until next time. Peace out. Word.